Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Q&A on Shirley. For those of you who are joining us from other theaters or elsewhere, my name is Wesley Embledge, and we're here at the, well, we're not here physically, but we're in the virtual space of the Coolidge Corner Theatre. We have a virtual screening room where you can rent a number of movies, including Shirley. And we hope that many of you have watched it before, or we hope that many of you will go and watch the film after. We have some great guests and a great moderator for you tonight. So I'm just going to turn things right over to our moderator. James Ponsoldt is a filmmaker, himself. Though he was not involved with Shirley, you might know his films, Spectacular Now, The End of the Tour, many others. And I'm just going to pass things right over to James.
All right, thank you, Wesley, and thank you, the Coolidge, for having us. It's a real honor to be here with this amazing film, directed by my friend Josephine Decker and written by Sarah Gubbins. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, thanks, James. Thanks for being here. This is so nice.
Of course. Where in the world are the two of you right now?
LA.
Yep, and I'm up in Ojai.
Oh yeah, you're in Ojai. I'm going to pretend like it's hot and miserable in Ojai and that it's just not a great place to be at all.
All right, well, we'll put ourselves in a New England mood, and hello to my family in Cape Cod. And let's just dive in, because I have so many questions. I love this film so much. I love all of your films, Josephine. But it's an honor. So can we just start from the beginning? Can we talk about the adaptation process of how this sort of came from book to screenplay, and sort of either of you, both of you, please sort of dive in.
Sarah, you should start.
Okay, I roped Josephine into this one. I was working with a producer, Sue Nagel, and we were looking for a project to do because we thought that would be really fun. And a friend of mine in Sag Harbor said, "Oh, I've got a good friend who is writing or just about to finish a book about a fictional tale of Shirley Jackson." And I said I would love to read it, and so he sent me the manuscript, and Shirley was born. I then kind of wanted to maybe just realign some of the things from the novel, and started reading much more thoroughly all of Shirley Jackson's works. And once a script finally eked out, we were looking for a director. We were looking for somebody who had the kind of sensibility that would understand how to crawl into Shirley Jackson's wild imagination. And I had seen only one of Josephine's films at the time. A friend of mine was like, you've got to meet with this filmmaker. And I just remember like the experience of watching Thou Wast Mild and Lovely, and I couldn't breathe. And I thought, I don't know who this person is, but I really hope she likes my script and wants to do this, because I really want her to.
Oh, that's amazing, Sarah. I didn't realize that you wanted me right away. I thought I was really trying to win you and Sue over. I was like, I did a crazy pitch. It was like 80 or 90 pages of images that was like, I was like, here's woman versus geometry and woman versus formlessness. And then the ending will be geometry and formlessness combined. Like I had this whole like plan for the movie, which I don't know. I'm not sure if that really happened. Maybe a little bit though. It was, I didn't realize that. That's so nice that you like that movie that much. But I thought I won you over with my 90 pages of abstractionist art.
That was just the dessert.
Okay.
Josephine, can you talk about sort of your first impression sort of in reading the script, and what was your familiarity with Shirley Jackson before this?
Well, so, I mean, the script is amazing. It's so rare to read characters that feel this full and this exciting. And I think there's a reason that it was really, that our cast is so good, is people read the script and they were like, I want to do this. It was a pretty lucky. It's not lucky. It's Sarah put in a ton of great work, and then we all got to benefit from it. So, I've lived in this script for we once we got on board. Sarah and I just kind of like enjoyed our meeting, and I read like two. I think I had read two of Shirley Jackson's books before we before I got on the project, and then once I was on the project, I tried to read everything, but I didn't really know her that. I mean, I knew obviously The Lottery, and I had just read We Have Always Lived in the Castle right before the script came to me, which was pretty wild. And I highly recommend anybody in the audience. It's just so nice to say that the audience. There's an audience.
We're not alone.
It's that We Have Always Lived in the Castle is one of her last. It might be her last novel. I think it is her last novel. Is that true, Sarah? Do you know?
I think that's true. Well, she had an unfinished one. Come away with me.
Got it. Okay. But We've Always Lived in the Castle is really amazing. It's just a wow. And all of her work is really exciting in different ways. And I think Sarah and I really tried to spend that year, and Sarah had already gone down this road, but I was just getting on board with the idea that, you're putting the audience into a Shirley Jackson story. It's not really about making a biopic, or it's more about how do you make this film feel like you're inside of a Shirley Jackson story. And so we really had a lot of fun, digesting her work and figuring that out too.
Mm-hmm. Can you, I think I mentioned this to you, Josephine, but Shirley Jackson's always had this quasi-mystical power in my life, because my grandfather painted book covers for a living, and he did a lot of Agatha Christie and Isaac Asimov, but he painted the book cover for We've Always Lived in the Castle, and it's my mother who's the model on the cover of that, and that hung in my house, and it's a really spooky cover. And I always wondered, from the time I was a child, I would look at that cover and wonder about the person who had written the book. And then when I read the book, I was equally haunted by it, and I became interested in Shirley Jackson's life itself. Can the two of you talk about sort of the process of telling the story that involves someone, but obviously, this is not journalism, this is a film, and sort of how you choose to include details, omit details, and sort of what the sort of, to use the Herzog term, what the ecstatic truth of the film was for you that you were aiming for.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to start? Because I feel like so much of that started in the script.
I'm going to be fumbly, James, when I talk about it, because
that's okay.
I'm still in that story and you had told me that in Savannah too when we met, and I just can't get over. There's a way in which there's something so ethereal about Shirley Jackson, and she seems to have really touched so many filmmakers and writers, and really influenced a lot of the ways we think about psychological horror. And so I guess to your question, I think that was the feeling that I really wanted to bring to the film. But really, as a spine, I would say I have a vampiric tendency as a writer already. And the more I read about Shirley, and the more I kind of, digested her novels and her short stories, I started feeling like these, for lack of a better word, like preoccupations that she had with the world. And I thought part of our film was to expose writers and to see the ways in which they kind of absorb their environment, absorb versions of their relationships, and squeeze it through that lens to make fiction. And so as like an artistic process, which is very messy and in no way linear, I wanted to include in the film just like these touchstones that we could see further evidence or fleshed out more in later work. But the idea of using her struggle to write Hangs a Man at this moment where she's both celebrated for this short story that she's really going to become known for, and also completely oppressed by the death threats and the hate mail, then to have the bravery to kind of traverse all of that and in essence like step into her much surer road as a novelist felt like a very rich place to kind of explore that writer's process. Something like that.
Would you like to add anything to that, Josephine? That was great.
Well, I'm trying to wait. I was like, what was the original question?
You know, I was sort of, you know, so curious when one is telling the story of someone's life,
Oh, right.
like what
Yes, reality
as
versus
a director,
fiction.
you know, what one feels the burden or lack thereof there is to you know, to tell the story of the realities of their detail.
Yeah, right. You went through that. Yeah.
I have.
Oh, that's right. You did. You really did.
Complicated.
Yeah. Did you find it complicated? So James made the end of the tour. I wonder, what was that process? Or, I mean, did you feel that way about? I mean, I'm just turning it right back on you, James.
You really are. Oh man, you're so sly.
That wasn't.
Oh, man,
that
what are you
wasn't
doing?
that wasn't like a cradle to grave. That was a particular moment.
Yeah, moment.
That was a brief window, and that was a unique. That was unique in that it was based on a memoir of someone who had a sort of transactional passing, you know, like an ephemeral relationship, you know, several day relationship, and it was someone who was profiling David Foster Wallace, the author. And so the thing that we just wholly embraced was that it was a subjective telling. It was not a God's eye point of view. It was a subjective perception of someone's life, and acknowledging the blind spots inherent to that. That was sort of
that was your approach. Yeah.
That was as far as interiority with you know, David Foster Wallace's mind. We were acknowledging what we could never know, and that was
right.
We came to peace with that very early on.
Yeah, I think it was similar for us. I mean, there was so much it's so inspiring to work from a real person. It's so meaty. I mean, Shirley's real life is so meaty. And by the way, Sarah, do you hear an echo when I talk at all? Because I heard a little bit of one when you talked. Okay. All right. Weird. I don't know what. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's funny because I just felt like so many things about her real life were like fascinating. Her real relationship with Stanley, so complicated and so messy, and in some ways like way ahead of its time, and in some ways like really abusive, and in some, I mean, and it's hard to say, I mean, it's hard to throw that word abusive around, and obviously she still has children who are living, and I don't know what their life felt like, but it certainly seemed emotionally abusive, you know, that he was like writing her these long letters about the other woman that he'd slept with, and challenging. And in the biography, at least of her, that Ruth Franklin biography, talks about how she had a pretty emotionally abusive mother, and so she kind of, you know, maybe recapitulated that relationship when in finding, you know, the husband that she landed with, and so maybe was like putting up with that. And then at the same time, I think she really was so they were so connected. He was obsessed with her writing and was in love with her writing, and so they were, I think they were clearly like dreamers together, and such intellectuals. Like, oh my God, I just want to like live in that house and hear them talk, which I kind of got to do a little bit making the movie, but you know, and Sarah wrote the most fantastic, wonderful words for them to speak. But they had 20,000 books when Shirley passed away. They were like obsessed with, like, they would just get obsessed with different things. Shirley was such a folklore genius, and she actually played a bunch of instruments and knew like 500 English ballads by heart. And Stanley was obsessed with the Delta blues, which was obviously a big influence on the film's music. That was, and that was in the script too. Sarah did that research, and so we got to bring that out in the film. But so I think we let like the reality filter in, and then we're constantly deeply aware that this is a fictional film, that, you know, that there's so many aspects of her life that we kind of bent to make sense in the story, and so that the story would really focus around the Shirley Rose relationship, and that would hinge around that, which is obviously a fictitious relationship. So that was nice to get that much room to play.
Yeah.
While one of the many things that I loved about the film was that while it's chiefly, you know, a story of these two couples, I feel that, you know, there is this character, Paula, who is this negative space, this absence that we feel in the middle of the film, who's sort of a psychic surrogate for the other women in the film, for every woman who's felt that they have been erased, or that to be seen, they have to disappear in some way. And Paula felt like a real presence in the film. It felt like the film was built around, like she haunted it in some way. Can you talk about that and the construction of the script and sort of how you made her feel present?
I mean, well, you definitely, that was I think that, again, you nailed it, but it in terms of the ways in which Paula maybe had the biographical details of a Bennington student, but the ways in which she's present in all of Shirley's work, really, is this idea of, the lost girl, the girls that are unseen, they don't fit, even if they perform to society standards, there's a part of them that is erased. And I would never like put a feminist label on Shirley Jackson, but in many, many ways, what she was unearthing in these heroines is just that, like the how confining she felt being a woman could be. And so I think, I think that was the impetus for it, definitely. But then I think when Josephine and I started working on the script, before we went into production, she really had such a visceral and visual kind of connection with this Paula character. And in fact, one day said, what if Rose and Paula are played by the same actor? Because I had never even conceived of that in the script. I mean, they're written as with two different character names. And I just think that really, as a way of thinking about who Paula was and her presence, really unlocked something huge in the film.
That's great. I'm going to go to a question from one of our audience members.
Wait, I want to answer that question too. Am I allowed to?
I'm so sorry. Yes, please.
No, it's just because it's fun. I mean, I love, because Paula was such a nut to crack. It was like one of the hardest parts of the movie. And I think we spent so much time on it in the script development. And then we were like, okay, cool. I think this is clear. It's still, I mean, whenever you have like a ghost haunting the film, you're always like, is this going to work? And she's sort of this ghost-like presence. And then, I just wanted to kind of shout out to our editor, David Barker, who I think when we got into the edit, he was like, because there was it was a little sometimes like, okay, we were just trying to like create clarity both around like where Shirley was in relationship to her novel and how the novel was going, and also sort of like give a little bit more voice to this character of Paula and how that Paula and Rose were sort of crossing over, and how Shirley's perception of Rose was affecting her work and affecting how she was writing Paula. So he had the idea to put in these kind of voiceovers of hearing Shirley write. And I think once we figured that out, and Sarah wrote these incredible passages that were like sort of like the first drafts of Shirley's, like, if different pieces of Hangs a Man, she's like, well, if this is like kind of like an early draft of Hangs a Man in her mind, and I thought it was so true to the essence of Shirley, and it really allowed us a path through the film to follow, kind of like how is Shirley relating to Paula and connecting to her, and how is Rose and her relationship with Rose, like, filtering into that work and really kind of pulsating with it. So I think that was something we unlocked really more in the edit. And then it was amazing that Sarah was so like, just came with so many visions and brilliance to like, those passages are so powerful. It's just great to hear Shirley's like writing,
I agree.
Almost writing.
Almost writing. Almost writing.
Yeah.
Writing begins with almost writing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go to a question from the audience. So
Great.
This is from Amy Geller on YouTube, and she says, the relationship between the two couples is like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? The two women feel like persona. Would you agree? And if so, could you talk about this?
There's
That's
two
so
feel
funny.
like persona, like the movie Persona, I'm guessing she means.
Yeah.
Well, when you say that's so funny, I mean, you definitely love Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
No, but remember how you and I watched Persona?
That's right.
early on.
They pick. She's Amy Geller knows her stuff.
Yes. Yes.
I know. I remember when I showed you the first. I think I showed like the YouTube, like the first 3 minutes of Persona or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think this could be the beginning of the movie. And you were like, okay.
Okay. Yes, and yes, and. Well, you nailed the. I mean, if you have a highly literate couple who loves to drink, living in New England in the late 40s, early 50s, who's a little acerbic, maybe borderline depressed, and a young couple comes to live with them, I just immediately was like, this is Virginia Woolf, so let's embrace it. The premise of the movie was more of, I mean, I think it's in some ways a little bit of an homage to it, that we have some links to that, especially when Stanley tells Shirley that it's time for the pets to go, kind of, or just the idea that they're going to have fun and that torturing them is a way in which to amuse themselves. It felt very fitting.
How do you find how does Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, how do the gender politics sort of it, how do they sort of in a modern production, or a modern read rather, how do they read to you? Do they read as dated or ahead of their time, or?
I wouldn't say dated. I think that there's so many, I think there's I think the gender politics are less pronounced than the just deep shaming, and the long memory of a marriage, and the long sufferingness of a marriage, but also the absolute dependency on that other person. I think our Shirley and Stanley version is there's a much more buoyancy and optimism in it. I think they can be cruel, but I don't think they derive a lot of pleasure. I think it's the Virginia Woolf is a bit more sadist than ours.
Yeah, and to speak to Persona, it's so interesting because I was thinking how I feel like every movie I make has a little bit of Persona's pretty much my favorite movie. I mean, I think Persona is like one of the greatest. It is probably the greatest movie ever made in my mind. So I think that there's, because at the end of the film, I think we could have probably made an ending that was a lot less ambiguous. And I think the thing is, though, Sarah's script, there was always something to me that at the end of the film that you were like, did they all exist? And I really did want to, it wasn't, because they sort of almost like that Rose is ejected almost as like the way that you would eject a story. Once you finish it, like, it's the way I feel when I finish a movie. It's like, it's over, it's done, I never want to see it again, that kind of feeling. And so, and I remember when we pitched on it, I was like, we should shoot the very end in this wide shot, so it feels like that she just become a character in Shirley's story and she no longer really exists. But then, and then when we shot it, and then when we got into the editing, I think that idea became even more complex, which was really just like how many realities are there, and what happens when you get really close to another woman? Do you sort of become each other? And I think there's a lot in Shirley's own writing where she has these dualities of these women who are very, very close, either sisters or friends, in a lot of her work, especially her novels. And there's usually like this one that is like gets along in the world, and there's one that sort of is like a little bit misanthropic and witty and funny, and they're sort of, the biographer talks about how they represent two parts of Shirley's own consciousness, that they're two characters, but they're really this one being trying to reconcile. And I think Shirley and Rose, in a way, in the film, are that, and then with Paula, there's sort of this collapsing of the three of them. I think in the end, that for sure, Persona is definitely an influence, is the short answer.
I'm told that we have time for maybe one more audience question. I want to sneak a quick
God,
one
really?
in.
That was so fast.
I know. I want to off of something you were saying, Josephine, like something like I'm thinking of the moment on the cliff, sort of where they're sort of Shirley is sort of, you know, embracing Rose, and she's there, and then in the medium close shot, Rose falls out. We go to the wide, and Shirley's there alone with the baby, which is just, it was breathtaking to me. I mean, I had to rewatch that moment over and over and over to see, like, is she falling? Like, is that something? Was that on the page? Was that something that came in the collaboration and early on talking to Shirley, your DP? Is it something that happened in the moment? Can you talk about a moment like that, how it happens?
Oh yeah, it was in the script, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
in the script. It was in the script, but I think the way that all came together in the edit was definitely something that I
Yeah.
discovered in the edit, in terms of just like the realities kind of falling into each other, and sort of, yeah. I mean, but the funny part is, what we realized why that moment was really complicated and confusing was that it's like Rose and Shirley on the cliff, and then it was like Paula jumps. And I remember that we hadn't even like, I remember standing on the cliff when we were like, wait, who jumps? We were like,
Yes.
is it Rose that jumps? Is it Paula that jumps? We were like, who's jumping off the cliff? You know, and then we were, and I remember, and it was funny because I remember it was even italicized in the script, Paula jumps. And, but I think in a weird way, it's like all of them, you know,
Yeah.
jumped, and all of them stayed standing on that cliff. And that was something that was so super magical. And actually there was a real magic moment with Lizzie when we were shooting that scene. The dialogue, she's supposed to come up behind Rose, and something about it, she was supposed to kind of like call Rose and get her off the try to get her off the cliff, and it just didn't work. And we were all like kind of standing on the, I mean, it's our biggest shoot day. There's like 20 people and everyone's in rigging, and it's so expensive. And you're like, oh my God, it took forever to set this up. And then we got to the scene and we're like, this isn't working. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And then like Sarah ran down from Video Village to be like, what do I do? Do you need me to write some dialogue? And then I was like, I'm just gonna run in and out of the woods, like until I figure it out. And I kept like running into the woods and running out of the woods. Like, if I can be Shirley, I'll figure out what to do. And then I'm like running into the woods, running out of the woods. And then Lizzie is like sitting there like, is it something I did? Did I do something wrong? What do I do? And I was like, no, it's something.
Yeah.
You did something. And it was amazing because she was like, well, I had this instinct to go stand next to her. That was my instinct, was to stand next to her, to not stay back. And yeah, and I just remember getting chills and being like, that's what we should definitely do, because this whole movie has been about power dynamics and about one person ahead of the other, and to stand next to each other. Oh, that image just, yeah, it just felt so resonant. I was just so grateful to be able to shoot that, about, you know, that's, it's really, this is how life feels, is that you are standing next to your shadow self on the edge of a cliff. That's how I feel all the time.
That's amazing. That image, it really is burned into my brain, and I don't think I'll be able to get it out. I'm greedy and I want to ask more questions. I'm going to sneak in another one of mine just because I have to. Josephine, I wanted to ask you this for a while. One of the many things that I keep saying, one of the many things I love, but there are so many things I love about your films, but is the sound design. And with each of them, I mean, I feel like I could hear the sound design without seeing the image for any of your films and know that they're one of your films. Can you talk about, you know, and to me, it feels, I will do a terrible job of describing it, but it's somewhere between what it feels like to be feeling like you're going mad, and just what it sounds like to be alive, which is always vacillating between like maybe excitement and madness and boredom. And but can you talk about sort of how you hear your films before you shoot them, and then as you go into post, and sort of, and what came from the script as you thought of it specific to Shirley Jackson?
Yeah, well, you know, I think I really believe in unleashing your collaborators, that your collaborators know more than you, and that's okay. I think I used to be so intimidated by that, and then I realized, like, what a gift that a sound designer just knows every sound in the whole library, knows how to put them on top of each other and make a zillion new ones. My like, I guess my second film, Thou Wast Mild and Lovely, and Madeline's Madeline were both sound designed by Martin Hernandez, who did Birdman and The Revenant and Pan's Labyrinth. And it was just, and I remember when when I was like, oh my God, the sound of the bug in Pan's Labyrinth, like that sound will stay with me forever. And he was like, that was 3,000 sound effects. We had 3,000. It was like, or at least it was over 1,000. It was like 1,000 sound effects layered onto each other to make the sound of that bug. And I think there's something so beautiful about, you know, when you let someone really define a world. And so, and I came from a music background, so I think that really affects the way that I like to, and I edit. I tend to edit a lot of my work, and so I like to let music is such a guide when you're editing, especially when you're editing something that needs to be driven by tone or mood. You know, that's stuff that, like all the Paula stuff in our film, that has to be kind of in another world. That, you can really kind of follow this. I think sound is map basically for me. So music is always really important, and sound designers, I tend to just like, you know, let them do everything they want to do, and then maybe like, you know, more, maybe like I would rather them do too much and then pull it back than feel like, come on, like we need the movie to have more juice, you know. So with Leslie Schatz, who did the sound design for Shirley, we talked a lot about making sure the sounds, because there were some horror-y spots, and that you could have used very modern sounding sound effects, stuff that like you can only make with computers now. And I was like, I just want to make sure every sound effect is something that like you could have made it with stuff that you had in 1940. So if it's like a really crappy sound, you know, horror sound effect can come from so many places. It can come from the sound of like a dishwasher, or a rumble of a car engine, or you know, a squeal of a bell or something like that. And so he just layered so many worlds into that, into the film, and allowed so much to transpire that way. And I think, knock on wood, I think he had a good time. I think he had a lot of fun. He just went to town, literally. And then he was like, did I go to the right town? And I was like, I think you went to the right town, Leslie. But I mean, you have to work with great people too. I mean, he's another just super, super talented sound designer who has just worked on a million like Gus Van Sant films. And so he, you know, he's adventurous. I chose him because I knew he was adventurous, and he chose me. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
I'm going to smuggle in one more question before the last question.
Great.
I have to ask, because I'll punch myself in the head if I don't ask. I mean, this is one of, I don't know what other films I would put it along with, but as a film that explores sort of the pregnancy as sort of a metaphor for creation, or creation as a metaphor for pregnancy, this film is so palpable. And I was just hoping you could both sort of talk about that, because it seems to be one of the very resonant themes of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what to say, except anything that I felt could help externalize what it felt like to walk around like a lunatic, like writers do with these characters and scenarios and snatches, and of, you know, that just that kind of mess that happens when this is me not knowing what reality is versus it's a noisy place, and it does feel like something is taken over your body. And I felt like having Rose's pregnancy, but also having Shirley be able to detect that in some way that made no sense, was a way to just kind of launch us into the journey that these two women were going to have. But you don't know really why those things happen. I don't know that. I think I'm making much more sense of it after the fact, but yeah. What do you think, Joe?
Well, I think all that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny, you know, neither of us had been, well, we would, what am I trying to say? There's so much horror around pregnancy too, I think. And
yeah.
I think honestly, to be in Rose's situation is pretty terrifying. To be in a house where you don't know where your partner is most of the time, and you're pregnant, and there's all this kind of like wifey expectations around you, and the person that you have to rely on, you know, if you're a little bit estranged from your own family, is Shirley Jackson. That's a rough spot. That's a tough spot, you know. So you kind of get why Rose is sort of at the end of her rope, you know, there. And it is. I mean, there's like this horror of anything going wrong, and there's a horror of everything going right, you know. And then your life is still consumed by another human, which is beautiful and intense. You know, it's super intense. So I think that, and I definitely think you're right that there's a super strong metaphor that, in a weird way, I don't know that we were even thinking about that much or being super aware of about the metaphor of like that, the writing process and how that does like inhabit you and take over your life and like sucks the milk from your breasts and like makes you think of nothing else for months. You know, that you're right that it's exactly like, I think it's I'm just realizing that now.
All right, I'm gonna go to let's finish off on a question from the audience. This is from Lisa on Instagram, and she says, "This is for all of us. What movies or TV have we been watching in quarantine?"
Oh, yeah.
Because this is a film about quarantine as well, right? In some ways,
yes.
it feels like that, so it all connects.
Well, I started Spike Lee's Malcolm X, which is amazing, and it's also over 3 hours. So we have a baby. Speaking of pregnancy, we have a 7-month-old. So I get to watch about like 10 minutes every 2 days. So I'm gonna get to the end of that movie. I can't wait to see it. It's really intense. And I also have been watching every once in a while, I'll see The Politician, the Netflix show, The Politician. Those are probably
interesting
that I've seen. Yeah.
What about you, Sarah?
Well, per your advice, I've been watching a very, very well curated LA noir. I would say like Fantasia. So thank you for that. And additionally, you know, I wanted something like long, and so I started watching Mad Men again from the beginning, which is very interesting how it some of the parallels of what is going on in the background. But yeah.
Oh,
long
those are
form.
great. I have been watching a lot of old LA noirs and neo noirs. Early on in the quarantine, I made it through all of Ken Burns' country music doc.
Oh wow!
I've seen the first 2 seasons of Killing Eve, and I'm excited to dive into the 3rd season. And then you mentioned Spike Lee. I just watched Bamboozled, which I did not see when it came out in theaters, but has an amazing Criterion that just came out. And it's a really bold, awesome movie, which I recommend to everybody.
Very intense movie. Wow.
Yeah.
And early on in the quarantine, I also saw, I've been thinking about painted backgrounds for my next film. And so Ashley, my DP, was like, you should watch Black Narcissus, which is amazing and has the most gorgeous painted backgrounds ever. And then that got me obsessed with Powell and Pressburger, the directors. And so I saw The Red Shoes also. That was like the very beginning. And then Sweetie, Jane Campion's film.
Oh, that is, I just rewatched that.
I had never seen it. What a crazy, amazing movie.
Right?
I mean, Sarah, you could have played the main character with that question mark, hair.
I'll get it. I love that movie. Oh.
Me too.
Yeah, what a great movie.
You guys, we should do this again, right?
Yeah, that's fun.
We'll have a little movie club check-in.
Yeah,
let's do it.
When the make the next film, and we'll be back here with the Coolidge next year or whenever we're making movies again.
Exactly. Oh, right. Thank you, James. Thank you so much for
James.
This. Yeah, really.
Thank you both. Thank you for making this amazing film. Thank you for everybody, who's with us today, and thank you to the Coolidge. You're an amazing theater. So
thank you, Coolidge. Yay, thank you, audience. Thank you guys for watching our film, and we're so grateful. It makes a big difference. Yeah, especially because obviously we can't do this in the theater. So having you there means a lot. Thank you.